Like if you could do it in California, you can do it anywhere.
If you could ban one word or phrase from mattress marketing, what would it be?
That's a good one. But you know what? I'm going to say sustainability, and I can explain why.
Welcome to Polycast by UT. Today, we are talking sleep, sustainability, and the business behind one of the most universal consumer products out there, the mattress. I'm joined today by Alison Keane, the president of the International Sleep Products Association and the Mattress Recycling Council. Alison came into the role with a background in environmental law, regulatory affairs, and trade association, including previously leading the Flexible Packaging Association, which once again brings my former life as a packaging journalist into the present. Alison, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And now, Alison, you obviously work at the centre of the mattress industry. So I have to ask, has that made you a better sleeper or just someone who thinks about sleep a little bit more than the rest of us?
The good news is I've always been a great sleeper. However, I will say that I'm not one of those people who can sleep someplace other than my bed, right? So like not on an airplane or on a bench or something. So I definitely appreciate the mattress. 100% think way more about mattresses than I ever thought I would ever in my life. That's for sure, taking this job.
Have you become the unofficial mattress advisor in your sort of friend group?
Oh, yeah. Not even just my friends, but definitely my neighborhood. People are always asking for advice or saying, oh, I slept on this bed and I really like it. How do I buy it? Hotels, particularly, they say, oh, I slept on this bed from the Holiday Inn Express. How do I get it? I'm like, I don't know. Let me ask some of my members and I'll get back to you. So, and then of course, they always want the employee friend discount, right? So,
oh, of course. Yeah.
Which works. It works. I get
Absolutely. Well, that's good to know. I wanted to sort of focus a little bit on the Mattress Recycling Council, if I may,
Sure.
Because I know there's a lot happening there. And probably the best sort of way to go into it is to talk about your expansion with it, because for a long time, you were kind of active in 3 states. You're active in California, which is always a nice in. Connecticut, Rhode Island. I think you added Oregon last year, and Virginia was discussed last month after legislation was passed there to set up a program by 2028. And I know you were also in New Jersey recently, where they're actively working with legislators to try and get a bill. Now, I know, you've told us here at UT in the past that you are having to expand an outreach in a very targeted way because the MRC doesn't have huge resources of time to do it more quickly. So can I just sort of press on you a little bit on firstly, how is it going in Virginia?
Sure. So, I mean, just to back up a bit, we have been active in 4 states, 3 states for about 10 years. My predecessor wasn't quite as proactive. He said, if a state came along and said they wanted it, then we'd work with them. I think the industry, 10 years since we started, is much more ready for the proactive approach to getting this in any state that's interested in it. And it also kind of corresponded with me coming on board about 1.5 years ago with a lot of states saying, why don't we have this program? Oregon was the first in almost 10 years. And then this year we had 8 states that were interested.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, we can't be everywhere at once, but at the same time, I really want to work with any state that wants us. So for the last several years, we've been in Maryland, we've been in Virginia, we've been in New York. And for better or for worse, we really like the Maryland and Virginia laws. We don't necessarily like the New York. We had 2 different bills in New York. One we liked, one we didn't. They got changed last year into the one that we didn't. This year, we're trying to make it the one that we do. You know what I mean? So there's smart EPR and there's not smart EPR. But Virginia was our bill. And we knew we had a really good chance this year with an administrative change. Now, for better, for worse, this is a recycling bill. This is keeping things out of landfill. It tends to play better in our blue states, in our Democratic states.
Okay.
And Virginia's a bit purple. We had a Democratic legislator the last couple of years with the bill. We had a Republican governor. this year we had an election late last year, and we have a full Democratic slate. So the
Right.
incoming governor is Dem. So we thought this is the year we got to really push it, and we think we can get it through. So we got it through, and she had Governor Spanberger had till the 13th on Monday to sign legislation, or it just becomes law, or she'd have to
Right.
veto it. There was a little wrinkle. You're probably the first to know that one of the secretaries of natural resource, came in with some pretty good amendments that we thought, these are actually thoughtful amendments. They're
Hmm.
technical amendments. They don't change the program in any substantive way, but
Okay.
we said, yeah. So they're going to come back in for a special session on the 22nd. We said we would agree with those amendments. Our sponsor, their delegate Lawfer, she said, yes, I agree with those amendments. So they'll put the amendments in. They'll vote just on the amendments, and then the bill will go back to the governor, who has then another week. So we've got a couple more weeks to wait, but
Hmm.
we're really, more than cautiously optimistic that Virginia will be our fifth state. And if Virginia goes, then we really believe that Maryland will go next year, and then DC. So we'll have this, what we call the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Will have a nice regional
Mm.
efficiency with the two states in the district. So we're really excited about that.
Oh, very nice. When you say technical amendments, what kind of things are we talking about? Technical in what respect?
Yeah, so more from a operational standpoint. So, for example, it basically says that you can either run the program on your own, or you can join a PRO if you're a mattress
Okay.
manufacturer, join a product stewardship organization. What if there
Right.
is no product stewardship organization that comes forward? We know that MRC fully intends to be that organization, but what if not? Does the department have to run it? Do they go back out for things like that?
Yeah.
Similarly,
Understand.
if we start the program and then God forbid something happens and we can't continue to run the program, what happens? What's the contingency plan?
Mm.
So they're just some of those technical amendments to say what if, to
Right.
set the state up so that it's ready for success, and there aren't any unintended consequences of a failure.
So when we talk about them setting up a program by 2028, realistically, how long do those programs really take to set up, and when do you envisage it being in place?
Yeah, if you ask the MRC ops folks, they're like, we could be there tomorrow, right? Like, it takes us 3 to 6 months. I mean, I think the longest part of what it takes the operations folks to do is get the contracts in place for collection. Many of the contracts for collection are with municipal governments.
Right.
Though they tend to take a little bit longer to get in place, and you're dealing with each individual collection site, not just one entity in the state. The transportation and recycling, we put a request for proposals out, and that can be done relatively quickly. But the other piece that takes a little bit more time is we put a program plan into the state Department of Environment. In the case of Virginia, it would be the DEP. And we
Right.
lay out the entire budget. We lay out where we think we're going to have the collection sites. We lay out, what transportation providers and recyclers that we'd be using. So all of that takes time to build, and then they need to approve it. So they have an approval process too. So we generally, in our pieces of legislation, give about a year for the MRC to get up and running in a state, given all the hoops that we have to go through.
Yeah.
And in Virginia, I believe we have to have a program plan in by the beginning or the mid 2027,
Right.
June or July, I think, and
Mm.
then that would give us really about 6 months to get started up once the program plan's approved. So that's why we're estimating early 2028.
Yeah, I mean, there's real traction, isn't there? You've mentioned it already there with the EPR schemes. A lot of states really interested, but obviously, when you're working in a country like the United States of America, you have so many states with very different ideas on how things should be set up. So that must be a huge challenge, and that work you do with the legislators must be very unique in every situation and very challenging.
Yeah, I mean, look, states' rights, right? So all states like to do something just a little bit different.
Mm.
Our core goal is to have it as harmonized as possible,
Yeah.
because any harmonization we have means, number one, it's going to be more efficient and less costly for
Mm.
us to manage, both on a operation standpoint, but also on a compliance standpoint. And then also you have, I think the cross-border issues. If you've got one state doing it
Yeah.
differently, this is our problem with New York. If you're going to do it so completely differently than we already have in Connecticut and Rhode Island and potentially New Jersey and Massachusetts, you're going to be this island where consumers,
Mm.
retailers, and manufacturers are going to be doing something different, and it causes, I think, confusion, and it
Yeah.
causes some cross-border issues where folks in Connecticut might come over to buy a mattress in New York because they think there's no fee. There's no
Okay.
cost to the program, which of course there is, but they
Yeah.
don't see it. So, and then they go back to Connecticut and they get rid of their mattress in Connecticut. So there's a cost imbalance when you're not transparent and you're not harmonized. The other thing is, we continue to see more and more mattresses being imported, right? 10 years ago, you didn't have a
Mm.
bed in the box. Now you do.
Yeah.
So there's more and more imports, and it's much more difficult for us to try to ensure a level playing field and make sure that the importers are paying their fair share, just
Yeah.
like the domestic producers and retailers. And so if you don't have the same system, for us to be able to assess whether or not, that producer is actually paying into the
Mm.
system, we have to set up a whole new system, and then we have to set up a whole new compliance scheme as well to try to get to that, right? So any of those complexities
Yeah.
add cost to the program when we're trying to keep the costs as low as possible and just get as many mattresses recycled as we can.
In an environment where obviously there will always be a lot of new mattresses being purchased by consumers, but in a market where
We
we're
hope,
seeing
Stephen, we hope.
yes, absolutely, yeah. In a market where we're seeing propylene oxide prices surge, we're seeing tariffs, of course, for imports. Is there a real interest in not just recycling? Because I know a lot of that material goes into other sectors, but in things like rejuvenation. I wasn't sure the exact phrase is. I know it's used, the different words used in different
Yeah,
locations, but
yeah.
rejuvenation of mattresses that are perhaps mattresses that are consumers bought and returned within 40 days. Is there a lot more interest in that because consumers are trying to potentially save money? The new, propylene oxide sending the price of foam up and so on for new mattress
Yeah.
materials.
Interestingly enough, so rejuvenation or restoration, whatever you want to call it. I mean, look, there's a hierarchy, right? Reuse, recycle, and in between there's something for like a renovator to
Yeah.
get. But interestingly enough, with the low cost imported mattresses these days, we are actually seeing a lot of our renovators go out of business.
Okay.
And that's, if you can get a new unit for $200 and the renovated
Hmm.
unit's going to cost you 4 or 5, you're going to get the new unit as a consumer. So that's something that we're watching. It's something that, any unit that can be reused, donated,
Mm.
or renovated before it comes ultimately back into the system is a good thing for, again, keeping those costs low.
Mm.
But yeah, with a lot of the comfort returns, and just the low cost of a brand new mattress, we are seeing, unfortunately, a lot of those
Yeah.
renovators go out of business right now.
Is there a lot of, when I bought a mattress when we moved into our new house, we bought a very expensive one because the idea was we would probably keep it for a number of years. But is there a tendency that people will buy a cheap mattress that maybe will last them a couple of years, and then that just creates this constant surge of waste
Absolutely.
material?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the average that we used to see, mattresses coming back into the program is about 13 and a half years, and now we're seeing, some of the lower cost
Yeah.
mattresses coming in much, much more quickly. And unfortunately, I think that the lower cost mattress, people are starting to see it,
Mm.
less as a durable good and more as a commodity, and I don't think that's good for any of us, and certainly not good for the environment. Not sure what we can do about it at this point, but we're certainly looking at it. We're looking at the trends.
And in terms of percentages, because I always read this figure that about 10% of mattresses are recycled. I don't know if that's globally or in the US, but where do you think we can realistically get? I mean, you're obviously doing some great work, but how can we get those percentages up? And in maybe 5 or 10 years, do you envisage there being a big increase in the recycling we see of mattress
Well,
materials?
in the United States, we have to have legislation to do this. Again, for a couple reasons. The biggest one being we have to have a level playing field. And if we don't have a mandatory piece of legislation saying you have to pay into the system, you brand owner, you producer,
Yeah.
then we're going to have a lot of free riders and we're going to have, one or two, I should say like maybe 5 or 6 big
Mm,
folks paying in and everybody else coming along for the ride. So in that aspect, we are limited in how much we can get recycled until we get that legislation
Yeah.
in place, which again is why I think we're going to be much more proactive in the next couple of years and try to get all the states that are interested. So we've done 17 million mattresses in 10 years in about 3 states, right? Because Oregon's only been up and running for a year.
Okay.
Think about how much we could do in the next 5 years if we got another 5 states. It would be,
Absolutely.
astronomical. So that's
Yeah.
really that's where we're trying to get to, as fast as possible, knowing the limitations of having to have that mandatory legislation to make it work.
Yeah. And New Jersey, you were there recently. What's the state of play there?
Yeah, so New Jersey is moving. We passed the House Assembly committee, and we're waiting for our turn in the Senate Environmental Committee. So I actually was speaking with our lobbyist yesterday, and it looks like it's probably going to be this month. Or sorry, we're in April. So May. So April,
Mhm.
they're in a bit of a recess. So it'll be May and if not June. So we're just waiting to get on the schedule. We think we've got a really, really good chance. I know that if Virginia goes the way we want, that New Jersey will be looking at that. They also have a new governor there, Mikey Sherrill. And she's very good friends with Abigail Spanberger, the governor of Virginia. So if we get it in Virginia, I'm going to have the governors call each other and say, do it in New Jersey too, right? Yeah. So I think we have a really good chance. New Jersey is a full-time legislature, so it may not be till, next fall,
Right.
that we see it. But yeah, it's moving and it's moving well. So we're really happy about that.
Do you have any sort of standout states where you have schemes in place or programs in place where you go to another state and you say, this works really well here, we would recommend this, or are they quite against that idea because they want to have their own unique
Yeah.
angle on things?
Yeah. You get a little bit of both. I mean, certainly we use California as the litmus test. Like if you
Mm.
can do it in California, you can do it anywhere. It's our biggest
Yep.
state. The most people, you have very, very dense population pockets, and then you have super rural areas. And when you're looking at, convenience and statewide coverage, that's really going to be the litmus test, as I said, as to whether you can be successful or not
Yeah.
for all residents in the state. It's also our second to longest running program, and they're very happy with us. The state folks are very happy with this. Cal Recycle is our oversight agency. So I do try to put people in touch with Cal Recycle and folks in the state to say, look, this is a really good running program. You don't need to
Mm.
do something completely different. So, New York is one of those places. However, New York is also one of those places say we do stuff a little bit differently. So tweaking here and there for a state
Yep.
is fine, but having a completely different program is not. So we do try to use the success that we've had over the last 10 years in other states to move states in the direction of
Mm.
harmonization.
And your members, what role do they play in establishing these programs?
They're very active in us being proactive, and any place that they are actually doing business, they're having conversations with us, with the policymakers. So, for
Okay.
example, in New York, Tempur Sealy has a plant, Sort of Simmons has a plant. We have a couple licensees there, Restonic. Even our retail members like the Macy's and IKEA's, and so they get very involved in talking to their legislators because I can come in as a lobbyist or as an association from, the DC area, and they're like, we're not sure I really care. But if you're a constituent actually doing business in that state, it's
Yeah.
incredibly important. So
Yeah.
another example is in Washington, we had a bill that we really didn't like. We were working very hard with stakeholders to try to get it into something that we could support. By the time the session started in January, it's a very short session there. It still wasn't in the shape that we needed it to be in. So we went out with our members in Washington State, and we have a pretty big footprint there. And we
Mm.
started to talk to individual members in the legislature, and it really did work. They said, okay, we're not ready for this piece of legislation yet. Let's keep talking and bring it back in 2027. So,
Yeah.
that's really where they play a vital role to say, I'm a constituent, I live here in this state. This is important to me, and this is what I need to see to support this legislation.
Understand. Um, Now, can I ask you about the fee at point of sale model?
Sure.
Is that, do you think that's the only truly viable option?
I do. I mean, we've looked at so many other options. In some ways, it might actually even be easier for us not to have that. But the transparency is so important from a regulatory aspect, but
Yeah.
also from a compliance aspect. It's so easy for us to go in and assess whether or not that fee was paid, particularly again when you're talking about brick and mortar
Yeah.
versus e-commerce. So we'll do a desk audit and we'll sit there and I'll pretend that I'm gonna buy a mattress in California, and either I see the fee assessed or I don't. And that's the easiest way that we can, and the least costly way that we can then reach out and say, hey, did you understand that there is this mandatory program, that this fee should be assessed, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm,
Or we can see that it's assessed, and then we go into our remitting system and we either see it was paid or not. And if it wasn't paid, then there's a disconnect there as well.
I see.
So yeah, so I mean, to try to assess the cost without knowing exactly what was sold in the state would be incredibly difficult, and it would be easier for somebody to, manipulate the system or just say, "Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't sell anything in California." So, and it probably should back up to say it's extremely important that we keep California funds in California and Oregon in Oregon. So each state is cordoned off.
Yes.
So again, if we were try to assess based on, just an estimated number of sales based on population or something like that. There are EPR programs that
Mm,
do internalize, quote unquote, the fee, but every program that we talked to said there is a significant issue with free riders. And that means our domestic producers are going to be paying
mm,
more for the program, and our importers and e-commerce folks are not. The other thing is it's just a big, big, durable product, unlike a lot of the other extended producer responsibility programs that are for batteries or
yeah.
packaging, and you've got millions of SKUs out there. And to try to apportion a percentage of a penny to each of those in a transparent way would be
Mm,
extremely difficult. So they chose not to do that. However, like I said, they, as we've talked to other programs about, best practices, they said that free ridership is the biggest issue. And we
yeah.
already have, anti-dumping and countervailing duties and, tariffs on imported mattresses to try to level the playing field from a market standpoint. We shouldn't add to that with a non-transparent
Yeah.
system for recycling, and that's really why the producers, want to see that point of sale fee.
Absolutely. I understand. Um, If I could talk with you a little bit about end of life options for the foam components of a mattress. We probably get to some chemical recycling topics later on, but MRC funds some research projects. There have been some successes, I know, for foam recycling related ones. Could you tell me a little bit about those successes and perhaps what's to come?
Sure. So I'm not the technical expert, but we do spend about $1 million a year through the California program. It's part of the legislation to look at end of life markets, right? So
Mm,
folks may or may not know that, generally speaking, in the past, most of the foam that came out of a mattress, that, a consumer mattress, was used chopped up and was used for a carpet padding or shoddy. And folks aren't buying as much carpet anymore, so we don't have as many outlets for that carpet padding. So we started a research fund and like a whole bunch of different projects. We put out an
mm,
RFP, request for proposal, and people will come back in. And so what we'll do is we'll fund sort of the think tank portion of it, and then once it gets past that, we don't own any of it. So we'll give it to,
right.
whether it's the academics or a private company. We'll say, okay, now you go make sure that, you find something. But we fund that sort of think tank part. It's like a,
Hmm.
Shark Tank type of
Yeah.
system. So there's several that have been really that we're really excited about that we think this could be commercialized tomorrow. We just need to find the right partners, and we'll try to do that. We'll put put some of these research folks in with into a market and say meet these people or meet these people. They might help you
Mm.
commercialize it to the next step, even though we're not paying for it. So, for example, there's a process called vitrimization, and you use heat and pressure to try to get the foam, and this could be it's in a it could be a small container in the recycler, or it could be a huge container in a manufacturing facility. But
Okay.
it basically compresses the foam into the thinnest that it can be, multiple, queen size beds or king size, whatever it
Mm.
is, but it compresses this with heat and pressure so that it's as thin as it can be, and then you can re-extrude it. So you extrude it back into pellets, and again, it's still mechanical recycling at this point.
Mhm.
Extrude it back into pellets, and it's malleable so that you can actually use it solely, or you can add with virgin material and make shoe soles with it. You can
Okay.
basically re-extrude it, and
Yep.
or gaskets with it. We had Vitricycle, who is the commercial entity that owns the technology, out at one of our at our ISPO Expo, our conference last
Right.
month, and he had a jacket. It looked like a leather jacket. It was pleather, right? But it looked great, and it was 100%. He had wallets, so they're doing a
Nice.
lot of really good work. They just need to be put, with the right folks to
Yeah.
set it off. But what a great story it would be for, any, a Nike or Patagonia,
Mm.
100% recycled foam back into a textile or into a leather or something like that, shoe sole. So that's one. And then we've got another really promising one out of ASU that is an oil spill cleanup. So, we can use
Okay.
a
Yeah.
lot of foam to, grab the oil out of the water, and then you can kind of wring it out and use it again and
Mm.
use it again. They have figured out that with some very light coating, they can
Mm.
increase the properties for the foam to absorb even more oil and less water. So they can absorb like 3 times more oil, but like 7 times less water. So, and then you can reuse it and reuse it. So it would be something, again, that maybe a state or city or county would use for oil spills. So we're really excited
Yeah.
about that. And then the other one that's, I think, all like it's a, but all of these are sort of the pilots, the
Mm.
proof is
Mm.
done, and they're waiting to commercialize. So the last one that is in that same boat that we're saying, okay, go and commercialize this, is one that grinds it down to a very, very fine sand-like powder, and then that powder can be used as filler for cement
Okay.
manufacturer, right?
Yeah.
Because cement manufacturer or coatings, paint coatings, they already use sand.
Mm.
And so if you can displace that sand, and environmentally, you're going to be doing, a lot more good and saving money. And so that's another one that we're watching to see if we can get it commercialized, and somebody can start using it. So
Yeah.
again, I'm not the technical expert, but you can actually go to mattressrecyclingcouncil.org, and we have a whole research page, and it's got all the research that we're working on, both ones that have crossed into the
Mm.
commercialization stage, but other ones that are just in their infancy, as you said, like a lot of
Yeah.
the chemical recycling things are.
Yeah, and it's whether you can make that take it down the commercial route, as you say, and it's
Correct.
early stages, but it does prove that there's a lot of great work taking place. Shows there's real good end of life circular solutions for polyurethane.
Yeah, we
Um,
would love, I mean, one of the things you could do with the powder is actually use it as a filler, put it back into mattress foam, right? That would be
yeah,
the ideal situation, and I think
absolutely, yeah,
that's what we're talking about when we start talking about the future and looking at chemical recycling, right? Taking it
yeah,
back to the polyol, building that
yep,
polyol back up to foam, and going from a mattress to a mattress, and full closed loop.
yeah. And Renuva, of course, is something we hear about quite a lot in the chemical recycling area. There's a lot of good progress with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, being across the pond, you guys are a little bit farther ahead in doing some of the chemical recycling. So we're watching,
Yeah.
and we're waiting. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're waiting. It's like, as soon as you figure it out, let us know. We do have some constraints here in the United States. So part of
Mm,
our advocacy is making sure that if we do have those viable chemical recycling solutions, we can use them, because some of the states
yeah.
here, think that it is, it's not fully baked.
Yes.
And maybe it's not yet, but as soon as it is, we're going to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Some of the states also, because look, polyurethane is plastic, and
Mm,
we've seen a less of a backlash for plastic goods in the last several years, certainly since COVID, but
yep.
there's always the, sort of plastics are bad, that we have to combat that. And many of the states feel like chemical recycling would just produce
Mm,
more plastics, and we
yeah.
shouldn't be
Yeah.
producing more plastic. So we have to overcome that. We have to give them good, viable solutions, scalable solutions, and prove that
Mm,
if we can use old plastics into new plastics, we won't be producing as much virgin.
yeah.
And so we're ready, willing, and able to make that argument, when we see that the time
Mm.
is right.
And it's something that's been obviously very important to ISPA and MRC. You both place, both place sustainability and recycling high on your
Absolutely.
agendas. Um, so, do you think progress is coming quickly enough? Is there enough money in it? Is it becoming more challenging, do you think, or is there more traction taking it in a good direction?
I think there's more traction, and it's not because of the bedding market. I think it's mostly because of the packaging market. So again, back to your packaging days, right? There's a lot of packaging. I used to run the Flexible Packaging Association, as you said. That's the type of packaging that is flexible, and it's really thin, and
Yeah.
it's usually laminated with another plastic or foil or paper. So it's
Yeah.
really hard to recycle, and it doesn't go into your blue bin. Um, because of the packaging extended producer responsibility legislation, we've got 8 states now in the United States that have it. That's just ballooned overnight. I mean, it's, 4
Yeah.
years ago there was no states, right? But because of that, I think there's more money and there's
Mm,
more impetus for folks to figure out how we can get some of this harder to recycle plastics into a circular system. And that is going to
yeah.
mandate chemical recycling. You're just not gonna get
Mm,
all of that through mechanical recycling, if any of the some of these harder, lighter weight plastics. So we're
yeah.
gonna benefit from that. And then to add to that, textiles is now coming up in the United States.
Yes.
So
Yes.
textiles is another one. I mean, right now we can recycle 75% of a mattress. So the wood, the springs, the foam, that topper that might be polyester and cotton, or foam and polyester, it's very difficult. And that's
Mm,
what's usually still going to the landfill. So as textile extended producer responsibility starts to come up on board in the United States, they're also going to need that tool of chemical recycling,
yeah.
and we can then piggyback off of that. So both of those two sectors of the economy, I think, are going to invest, and we'll all
Mm,
benefit from that. In the fact that some of the solutions will work actually for foam and for our our toppers, and
mm,
for things that we can combine together with other sectors and have efficiency, from a cost
yeah.
standpoint. So, yeah.
And I guess if we can add some bio-based content at the front end as well, it adds to the
Sure.
sustainable conversation and adds to the cost as well, I'm sure. But it
Yeah.
certainly still adds to the correct agenda we're all trying to work towards.
Correct. Yep.
Um, can I ask you, in terms of your background, Alison? You've been in the role now for nearly 2 years.
2 years in August. Yep.
Yeah, 2 years in August. How's it gone? Has anything surprised you after the last 2 years? As how much fun have you been having in the role?
It's a lot of fun. It's so much fun, and it's a really tight-knit community, so that surprised me. I mean, I've been in the manufacturing world for a really long time, and I don't think I've ever worked for an association that the manufacturers were
Mm,
so tight-knit, and really collaborative. So that's been a surprise, but a welcome surprise.
yeah.
And the only bad thing I would say is that we're in such a down economy, and that was surprising to me as well. I thought, look, people do, how much research do you do before you buy a car? how much research do you do before you buy a bed? Or do you think of that bed as just an integral part of your life? Because if you don't, you should. So if you've got a bad mattress or a really old mattress
Mm,
and you're putting off that sale, you need to think about it as your health and your livelihood. You need to think about it as an integral part. You spend 30% of your life, if you're lucky, on a bed. It should be a good mattress, right?
yeah.
However, we have seen durable goods, including mattresses, down for the last 6 years. So it is cyclical. You shouldn't have to buy a bed every 2 or 3 years. It should be long term.
Mm,
But we've seen just a complete downturn for much longer than, if you look at the trends in the industry, than we have for a really long time. So as the association, we're trying to think about, how do we get that message out to a consumer? How do we make sure that the
mm,
consumer knows that this is one of the most important things that they have in their home? And then they should think, hard about it. And how do we
yeah.
help them do that research so that they find a good mattress that provides the health and safety that they need? So that's been a surprise and a challenge that we're still trying to figure
Mm,
out, 2 years in with our communications and our data management staff. But also exciting.
yeah.
Just something I didn't think I would delve into, and now like I said, I think way more about mattresses than I ever thought I would.
Do consumers, do you think, do they buy into the marketing that we see? I've noticed a lot of prevalence in marketing for things like cooling gels in several layers, all the different functionalities that you can now integrate into a mattress. Do consumers buy into that, do you think, or do they see it as a little bit of sort of PR fluff?
No, I think, again, you don't really think about a mattress until you go to buy a mattress.
Mm,
And then you get bombarded with the technology. So that's where, I think, again, ISPA, we have Sleep Savvy, which is our retail publication, that we need to think with our retailers and our retail sales association, like, how do we get the message across
mm,
without it sounding like, sort of BS and that can't possibly, so how do we get it, across? It's like the technology is
mm,
real and we can customize for what you need. But you as a consumer need to do some research and figure that out. Help us help you type of thing. And how do we also get folks starting to think about a mattress before they believe they need one? So
mm,
that is that thought process. Again, how much research do you do before you buy a car? And how many cars do you test drive before you pick the one you want, right? We need people to be doing the exact same thing for mattresses. You spend more time on your mattress than you do your car.
yeah.
Hopefully. There are some people with some terrible commuting, but hopefully you spend more time on your mattress. So, how do we instill, that, like, don't just buy it off the internet before you've, even tested or seen it or gone and talked to a retail sales associate about it. You wouldn't do that for a car, hopefully. And you probably shouldn't do that for your mattress either. And then if you want to buy it online, you do,
Mm,
but it doesn't come back as a comfort return.
yeah.
You use it, you know what I mean? So it's the whole sort of life cycle of a mattress, and how do we impart that information
Mm,
to a consumer so they are a very savvy shopper.
yeah. And my advice is always, if you have children, get a king size mattress because they're going to end up in between you.
Children or pets,
Yes, of course,
right?
yeah.
100%.
um, on just expanding finally on your role before I move on to some sort of quick fire questions, if I to end this podcast. Your role, Alison, you sit between manufacturers, retailers, policymakers, and recyclers. Where does the most diplomacy come in?
Policymakers.
Yep.
100%. Like I said, this is a really tight knit, great community. My board, my executive committee, the folks that, I haven't even met all of my members yet, but all that I have are just so helpful, so knowledgeable. I can ask anything, whether it's a stupid question or not. I can call and say, okay, explain this to me one more time. And I don't get the, oh my gosh, what did we hire? This person doesn't know anything about mattresses, right? That kind of thing. And you're constantly learning because there's constant innovation
Mm,
as well. So I don't have any problem just straight talking with my members and my board and things like that. Policymakers are a little bit different. Again, I'm coming in from an association. I may or may not be doing business. I mean, it's great that we have headquarters in Virginia, and I used that in Virginia. but generally speaking, I'm coming into a state where I don't have any nexus unless I have a member. And again, they may have ideas of how they want to do it, and so you really have to speak to that. And then you're
Mm.
speaking to both sides of the aisle, right? So
Yeah.
the D's are going to want one thing, and the R's are going to want another, and you need to know who you're speaking with. And a lot of times you're speaking with staff,
Yeah.
which by the way is fantastic. The staff are usually the folks that know what's going on. The legislator or the
Yes.
policymaker may have thousands in bills in front of them, and so they're going to rely on the staff to let them know.
True.
So yeah, so you got to know who you're talking to, and you have to use a lot of diplomacy,
Yeah.
and give them a little bit of grace because they've got a lot on their plate and they're trying to do good work as
Yeah.
civil servants. And you're not the only person that's asking for something, so you have to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, of course. That makes a lot of sense. I'd like to finish with some quick questions, if I may, and just for short answers.
Sure.
So, Alison, if you could ban one word or phrase from mattress marketing, what would it be?
That's a good one. You know what? I'm going to say sustainability, and I can explain why. Um, you gotta tell the customer what sustainability means. You
Yeah,
can't just say
yeah,
sustainability because everybody's got a different definition, and some people might not have a definition at all.
that's true. Yep. And consumer habits. What if you could change one consumer habit around mattresses? What would that be?
Do not buy your mattress online without testing several first. It is a personal product. You gotta sit and lay and roll over on it before you make a decision.
Absolutely. I always say that I know you can probably have it now, can't you? You can have big double mattresses where you have one half that's got a different
Yes.
firmness to the other, because obviously when you're with someone, they tend, you don't have the
Yeah.
same desires.
Yeah, yeah.
So
We call them split heads.
yeah,
So, yeah, so even if the mattress works for you, it might not work for
yeah,
your partner. So, both of you should be in there if there's more than one person sleeping
absolutely.
on that mattress.
um, what does the mattress industry, do you think, get unfairly criticised for?
I I I don't know. Stephen, that's a really good question. I think, I haven't really heard anything. I think the only thing I would say is it's not unfair, but the fire retardant.
Mm,
You'll hear a lot about, do we need fiberglass? Do we need this fire retardant chemical? Do we need and it's like, yes, you do.
yes,
We were
yes.
founded on basically making sure that there was a standard 115 years ago to protect consumers from fire. It's not that your
Mm,
mattress won't um, light on fire, but it'll smolder and it'll give you a
yeah.
chance to get out of your house. And so when I hear a lot of the negativity about chemicals or fire retardant, um, fibers and things like that,
Mm,
I do feel like that's unwarranted because it's a safety issue and
yeah.
it's real.
And as you say, I mean, we tend to find that some of those standards are different in different geographies. I mean, in UK has quite stringent um, flammability standards, and perhaps more so than some other European countries. It's
Yeah. And
it's a
y-
tricky one.
yeah, the United States does as well. And there's a lot of different ways to comply. But what
Mm,
we're also seeing is there's a lot of imports that don't comply at all. So
yeah,
how do we protect the consumer from that? And how do we work with our government? We're doing a lot of work with the Consumer Product Safety Commission here on
yeah.
trying to nip that in the bud and make sure that, every mattress that comes in from overseas is actually compliant with the domestic producers compliance, in the United States. Because
Yeah,
again, it's a safety issue, it's a health issue.
absolutely. And final question, uh, as we're a polyurethane audience, how important is polyurethane to the mattress industry? Do you think that will increase in the years ahead?
I think it can only increase. I mean, again, it's highly technical. Folks are coming up with new recipes, for lack of a better
Yeah,
word, for the foam, and it's critical. We went from not having any foam and having a lot of springs and heavy
yeah,
materials um, that weren't very comfortable. to having, thousands of different types of foams that can support you in different ways, that can cool you, that can heat you up, whatever. The technology is amazing. And we have all foam beds now. Again, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
wouldn't have seen that. So I think the use of foam and the continual technical advancements in foam is something we'll just continue to see more and more of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Alison. It's been real fun talking to you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. And if you want one of our research folks from MRC to get on for a next podcast, I'm sure we'd be thrilled to do that as well.
That sounds great. We'll be in touch for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. You've been listening to Polycast by UT, helping your business expand in all the right places. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.